Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, May 9th. The YouTube is being slow, but I'm just going to get going on the others because I can always take it from here and share it to them. I want to talk about a few things today. I want to talk about a couple initiatives and fun things that are happening over the weekend in the city. I want to talk about some engagements that you can participate in. I want to talk about road safety and some of the additional funding that we've contributed. And I want to talk about a couple notices of motion that I'm bringing and that a few of my colleagues are bringing to executive committee next week. Because there is a lot. There's actually 9 notices of motion that are coming, which is a lot. But I want to talk about what the timing is and how it all plays together, because I think it's really important. And it may be election season and I think it may not be, actually. So I want to talk about it that way. So a couple things. So tomorrow is World Migratory Bird Day. There's lots of events happening at the Inglewood Bird Sanctuary. While you are there, I would encourage you to pick up a community cleanup kit. So this is garbage bags, gloves, hand sanitizer. Last weekend was the Parks and Pathways cleanup. And but there is garbage everywhere. So if you can lend a hand, pick up one of the free kits, and help go clean up your neighborhood, that would be great. It is also community cleanup season, so this is where we bring the garbage trucks to communities, and you can bring your items and you can recycle them. So a lot of them also jointly host with other recycling organizations like electronics recycling or metal recycling. They often have like a area where if things are in horrible condition and maybe you can do some swapsies and tradesies. Those are happening at community cleanup. So the community cleanup schedule is online at on the city website. If you go to calgary.ca, type in community cleanup, you can get a list of all of those. Of course, it is starting to be spring event season in neighborhoods. So I know Lakeview has theirs coming up. Lakeview has theirs coming up at the end of this month, which is May, and then Neighbor Day in June. So we're just starting to see, again, lots of people getting excited, being outside. And so lots of community events are happening, and I always encourage everyone to go and get connected and be part of their neighborhood, be part of the community. And always remember, those events are looking for volunteers. So if you have a chance to show up to volunteer and to support your communities that way, that's really fantastic and always appreciated. They take a lot of volunteer effort to support. One thing I will say, good news, council did approve an increase to the Ward Community Event Fund. So this is funding that we give to community organizations every year. Council had been at about $10,000 per ward per year. So in Ward 11, that gets spread out to about 20 organizations at about $500. We've doubled that money to $20,000. So now every organization is going to get about $1,000, and we also put in a request for review starting in the 2027 budget to see if we need more. Originally, Councillor Winus had actually suggested $50,000 without some data and review and potentially some caps, because some wards don't have as many community associations, so they stood to get a lot of money. Whereas Ward 11, not poor Ward 11, but Ward 11 just wouldn't have been able to still give as much because we just have that many more organizations. So happy about that. So just again, on a pathway towards supporting communities, we also, through the surplus budget, gave some more money through the Federation of Calgary Communities for some community activation grants. Lots happening there. I want to give a shout out to Braeside. Braeside has some new amenities through the Parks Optimization Program. So we work with Braeside, when I say we, I mean the city, worked with the community of Braeside around parks optimization. So they got 2 new playgrounds, but then turned 2 other parks into some other community amenities. So there's some disc golf I see at one. I have to go check it out. There looks like there's some other kind of seating-ish things at a couple of the other playgrounds that they've made use of. And this again came from a couple things. One, some additional funding that I really fought for in the recent in budgets past, but also it changed the kind of amenities that we could look to be putting into green spaces and parks. So thinking about more than just playgrounds and understanding that as communities' life cycle, playgrounds might not be always the most appropriate. They may not hit every age range. And so what are the other amenities that we can put into park spaces to capture a variety? So disc golf is one of those great ones. And even just stumps and boulders and climbing things, which are great, not just for little kids, but for teenagers too. So I need to get out to Braeside and take a look at that. Before I forget, if you're a mom, happy Mother's Day. It is this weekend. I will be hanging out, of course, with my kids for a little bit of it, hanging out with my mom, and wishing happy Mother's Day to all of those and some of my friends out there. So let's talk about road safety. So road safety, you may have seen a couple articles in the news about it, that we added an additional $1 million for 2025 for a road safety budget. And these are for things like the speed cushions, so like the traffic humps. These are things for crosswalk improvements, lighting and safety improvements, improvements around schools, pedestrian improvements. So we spend annually about $5 million on this program specific to safety. And then we added an additional $1 million. I will also note some of the additional money that we spend on road safety comes just through our general paving projects. So $5 million isn't a true capture, but we know we're spending $5 million dedicated dollars to safety initiatives. Now, those safety initiatives don't necessarily include things like in Windsor Park, they're getting a new sidewalk, a new permanent sidewalk along 4A Street. That wouldn't be part of it. So this is really more focused around schools, intersection safety, crosswalks, things like that. So we added it, and the speed humps and the speed cushions, especially through playground zones and on residential corridors. We know the societal cost. So we calculated it out. The societal cost of traffic incidents is $1.4 billion a year. So when Calgarians complain to me about their taxes going up, I say, the best way to keep our taxes low is for everybody to drive the speed limit, to pay attention, and just be better drivers and be more attentive and more aware. We've had a number of pedestrian fatalities in the last couple years, and they need to stop, and we need everybody to be paying attention. And we need to put that the onus on those who are the most powerful in the situation. Those who are the most powerful is actually the vehicle, because they are just so much bigger and stronger. So we need to really be focusing on this, and we know that we just can't afford to do interventions at every intersection. We know that that's a big boost would be a big tax increase. And so the way that we do that is by doing strategic investments in strategic locations. But it just sucks that we sometimes that we're having fatalities. And I would recognize that we had one last November in Ward 11. We're doing that intersection review right now and getting the data and the counts on that to see if it's warranted. It probably won't be, because the pedestrian crossings aren't that high. But there might be other improvements that we can do. So again, also scaling improvements and scaling safety measures to kind of volume, not only of traffic, volume of pedestrians, and sort of what is the overall situation there. So know that we would love to do more, and it's striking that balance. But ultimately, the better everybody drives, the less we reduce collisions, the less need we need to intervene with costly interventions. So I'll say that. One of the other things I want to talk about is the 9 notices of motion that are coming to council next week, or to executive committee next week. And there's a couple that are similar and a couple that are different. So 2 that are coming. So Councillor Wyness has a notice of motion around 10-year capital forecasting. This is something we've been doing. I'm really curious to see what her notice of motion is asking for that we aren't doing already. It's not clear to me. I've put in an ask to our finance teams to get some more clarity on there. Because I have seen us be doing some 10-year rolling capital. I think we need to be a bit more transparent on what that 10-year rolling capital is. So whether or not councillors have line of sight on it, whether or not, we're talking with things like BIAs and builders and developers who are developing both in the brownfield and the greenfield, all of the areas, so that we're strategically aligning investments. Make sure that we know that our capital investments are maybe lining up with where some of our civic partners are doing work, or where communities are looking for work. So maybe, I think this is where it's going. I don't totally see it that. Then the other piece is Councillor Spencer has a notice of motion. We do a lot of one-time spending. And pros and cons to one-time spending. I don't think it necessarily recognized. So one of the pros of one-time spending is it helps keep our tax increases lower. One of the cons of one-time spending is that we can't sustain programs sometimes through one-time spending. So I think we need to sort of strike a balance around one-time spending. So for example, this extra $1 million would be considered one-time spending. So what does that mean for base? And I can share that we're looking at in 2026 budget a base dollar amount of $7.5 million instead of $5 million. So that's an example of where you would roll it into base. But of course, the more you roll into base, the more implications it has on the tax rate. So I think it's striking a balance, especially in the difference between operating and capital, and where you do one-time spending and where you do operational spending. So Councillor Spencer is really keen to explore that because we have had some one-time spends, especially operationally. And I agree with him that it's not sustainable, and it's not really sort of showing the true picture of the dollars that we need to run our city consistently and effectively year over year. So knowing that. Councillor Dhaliwal is looking at rideshare companies versus taxi, and again, how we continue to explore the difference between those two things, and the different rules and regulations. There's some provincial advocacy that needs to happen there. Sometimes it's hard with provincial advocacy on issues like that because it doesn't affect all municipalities, and it tends to affect your bigger cities more. But definitely always worth exploring, what are those dynamics at play. Councillor Walcott has a notice of motion around misinformation and information and fact checking, and I think it's a really interesting one. I think it's really interesting because, of course, we have conversations again around, what are the costs of things? Where are we making improvements? How are we putting a spin on something? To make it sound like a good news story, but what is the background and the actual information that is there? What are the one-liners that sometimes get pulled out? And that there isn't a full sentence and a full conversation around what we're doing, and there's just one-liners and around some misinformation. And there has been misinformation that has come out from some of my council colleagues, and it doesn't really sort of paint the full picture and the intent. So I can give an example in the Heritage Local Area Plan. Councillor McLean was saying, well, he voted against it because it proposed taking lanes of traffic away on McLeod Trail. And I was just like, not everywhere. There was one or two locations that we were specifically exploring that were kind of these like slip lanes of McLeod Trail. And the reason they explored taking them away was actually about intersection reconfiguration to allow for better access, like in and outs. And so and then re-strategizing how the parking would work there. And so it's like, we weren't really taking lanes away. So maybe the way it was worded in the document wasn't super awesome, but it was really more about configuration for better traffic flow and better parking to get to the businesses. So it wasn't just about taking lanes away to give them to bike lanes. Like, that actually wasn't it at all. So it was like a total little bit of like non-contextualized information sharing to say that you're against something without really explaining the dynamics and like the two situations along the entire stretch of McLeod Trail that it applied to. And so that was very frustrating for me, a very frustrating situation. So again, I was encouraged, and this is one of the reasons I do 15-minute Fridays, is to have, politics in full sentences as best I can, and recognizing that even 15 minutes isn't enough. And so the other one that I'm bringing is the notice of motion on upholding council accountability. So the province has introduced Bill 50. This is a suite of bills that they have been introducing in the last little bit that are really dismantling some of our institutions. I won't lie about it. And again, my perspective, dismantling some of our checks and balances in our institutions that we have, both an autonomy of municipal councils and autonomy of school boards, and now, so Bill 55, the Health Statutes Amendment Act, like just the dismantling of public health care, which is deeply concerning. Anyways, I get that is not municipal jurisdiction. I'm not going to touch on it right now. But it is problematic. And it's problematic, especially for smaller municipalities, but I'm going to leave it. So I'm going to go back. So Bill 50, one of the clauses in there is repealing councillor code of conduct. And so part of our code of conduct is, yes, behavior between us, but it's also behavior with the public. It is behavior with staff of our corporation. In the city, it is behavior with our civic partners. It is behavior basically just writ large. Repealing that. With that also comes the repeal of our integrity commissioner. So that means there is no way to formally complain at this point about the conduct of your councillor. One of the other things it gets rid of and dismisses is the reporting. So we have to report quarterly on the meetings that we take and the gifts and the benefits that we receive. So today I was at Alberta Municipalities sitting on the governance committee. I can bill for that. I report on that. So that is gone. So and also under the code of conduct, that is where the protection of our staff is. And the protection for the public of our staff. So right now, the code of conduct applies not only to us, but to our staff, because our staff are contractors to us. They are not employees of the municipality. They are contractors to us. So my notice of motion really just like outlines what is going to be missing, what is lost in this, and then what are the checks and balances. So for voluntary disclosure of meetings, gifts, and benefits, so putting that provision in, so making sure we don't lose that process or that policy, or that not if we can't have a policy, that process. So making sure there's a voluntary way, and then creating a document that counselors can opt to use for their staff as part of their contract signing. So something that probably reflects the city's, so the administration side, respectful workplace policy. And that is not only to protect our staff, but that is also to protect the public from any misbehavior of our staff, and that we have a way to hold them accountable. Because without a code of conduct, we have nothing. So so why does this matter? So without a code of conduct, behavior of counselors, it's a free for all. And yes, we should all do good, be good. But we know there are situations when that hasn't happened, and I will point you no further than the Joe Magliocca scandal. That started with code of conduct, and escalated from there. And a lot of that was, again, disclosure of meetings, disclosure of gifts and benefits. So there will still be a provision. We will still have to have disclosure of spending of our ward budget. So that is good. But again, so just a reminder, because of the code of conduct, be able to have something go all the way to the courts, for misuse of public dollars, because it was having to fact check against meetings, because you have to report when you spend, who you take a meeting with. So it's all intertwined with each other. So it's important to me. It's important to me, and I think it should be important to you as the public, that you have a way to keep tabs on your elected official, what they're spending, what they're receiving, who they are meeting with. That is a fundamental of accountability, and happy to try to uphold that where I can. And so I guess we'll see how my council colleagues feel about it. So it'll be very interesting, I think, conversation, because I know I've already had some colleagues who talk about wanting less government in government, or less government in their lives as elected officials. And I'm like, maybe then don't be the government. I don't know. So we'll see how that shakes out. I think it's gonna be a very interesting conversation. And that will also accompany, when it comes to council on the 27th, the report from our ethics advisor and our city solicitor. So lots happening there. So it is just going to be a very busy season. So, and again, why are notices of motion coming now? Is it because of election, or is it because, honestly, sometimes it just takes this long for issues to surface, or issues come up and the work just doesn't stop? So just because it's election season, the work doesn't stop. And you know, as you have spent 3+ years in a job, you really start to see what levers you can pull, where the work needs to get done, and how we continue to look at ways to set ourselves up for success. And so I actually expect this meeting and the next meeting to be very busy with notices of motion, and just trying to help get things set up for that incoming council as well. I think a lot of people are looking forward to that. But again, also just addressing the issues that are right before us. So that's in a nutshell. It's busy season. We have Federation of Canadian Municipalities later this month for those of us that are going. And I think that's going to be good to hear, what the federal government, as this government under Mark Carney has planned for municipalities. I think there are some interesting conversations to be had. I'll point out one, talking about setting up a Crown Corporation for housing. At first I was like, yes. And then I was like, wait, does that duplicate efforts of all of the housing providers? And, I think we have something like Calgary Housing Company and Attainable, which are already subsidiaries of the city. And does it just duplicate their efforts? So would it not be better for the federal government, if they have land, to be transferring that to the existing providers rather than setting up their own Crown Corporation to run? So I think those are interesting conversations. I'm hoping to talk to the housing minister about that when I'm out there, and talk to some other advocates about that. So lots happening. And the other thing I'll just say here One of the big files on my desk is Safety City. So for people who are wondering, I'm working really, really hard both with the city and with our city, like administration, so Real Estate Development Services Partnership and Safety City, to find them a new home. I hear that there is value, that, I hear that there is like a lot of respect. I believe that there is value in this organization, and we are going to be doing the work to help find them a new home. It is not smooth. It is very bumpy. I acknowledge that, and it may take longer than what everybody is hoping for. But I think getting to the right solution in the right place is really important. And I don't think rushing it is going to be valuable either. So it takes a minute to pause and sort of recognize we're working for long-term goals as opposed to short-term. So I'll just say we are working on Safety City, and I hope that we can share more soon about that as just a win for our little Calgarians who are, and again, tying it back to road safety, who are looking for those experiences. Happy Friday, all. Once again, happy Mother's Day to everybody, and I wish you all a great, warm, sunny-ish weekend. But then I'm kind of so okay with the rain on Monday. Okay, bye, all.